Hello and welcome to the Chateau Diaries, where I am celebrating 20 years of living at Lalande. This month is our 20th anniversary, 2 whole decades of learning about this chateau, living in this chateau. And over those years, I've learnt many invaluable lessons, and I thought I would share them with you today. I've been spending some time going through all of my old photos and records of that time, and it's just brought so many things back to mind. And in case any of you are thinking of taking the plunge and taking on a huge project like this yourselves, I thought you might like to learn some of the things that I wish I'd known back then that might have saved me quite a lot of sleepless nights. Lesson 1 is that the purchase price is just your entry fee. Now, this is such an important lesson that I've made an entire standalone video about it, which I will link to here. So I won't talk about it too much in this video. But basically, the purchase price is a down payment on what is going to be your entire lifetime of commitment, pouring all of your resources, both emotional, physical, and financial, into the chateau. Do not be fooled by low purchase prices. Having said that, and knowing that there's a whole video for you to watch about it, let's move on to lesson 2, which is the chateau always decides. This year, I was hoping to start work on the terrace. The chateau's terrace is in a terrible state. It needs to be completely taken down and rebuilt, and then suddenly we got a leak in the kitchen. And that led to the entire kitchen being redone, which means that now the terrace, whilst it will still be done, has been pushed a little bit. And when these things happen, which they do all of the time, think, all right, what will the silver lining be in this situation? For example, with the kitchen, we ended up with a beautiful kitchen, and I wouldn't have done that. That would have been years down the line because our kitchen was usable, it was functional. And now we have the space that we use every single day, several times a day, being the most beautiful in the chateau. So that has lifted everyday life. So rather than getting upset about it, I embraced it. So if you are thinking of buying a historic building, know that it will throw surprises at you all of the time. Some of them will be good surprises, some of them won't be so good, and those will definitely be very expensive. So learn to make the best of them. Swim with the tide, don't try to fight it. And that leads me to lesson 3. You don't own a chateau, you serve it. I am here as the caretaker of the Chateau de Lalande. It decides when things need to be done. It tells me what my priorities are, what my budget should be, and I have to scrabble around trying to make all of those things that it wants happen. And if you want to live in a house that is there to serve you, which I think is what most normal, sane people would want in their lives, then probably a huge historic building isn't for you. If you want to have a place where you can just lock the door, go and do all of the fun things that you love in life, and then come back to find it looking exactly as it did when you left it, ready to welcome you, then don't buy a chateau. Because if I left this place completely empty, locked the door and went away, when I came back, I would find that leaks had started all over the place, half a wall would have caved in, and mould would have started growing over the furniture. And then I have to serve it and fix it and sort it all out. So only do this if it is a passion. Lesson 4. Everything takes 3 times longer than you think it will and costs at least twice as much. And I think that that might be the golden equation of chateau renovation. I'm quite glad I didn't know it in the early days because it might have put me off. But after redoing the roof of the chapel, I thought in future, when I can put money aside, we'll do the interior. And my money that I'd set aside for the interior later on was €3,500. Well, the interior of the chapel and the structural work needed on the exterior is now at 600,000. I can't even work out the percentage increase of that, but it happens with absolutely everything here. And you could get frustrated. You could find yourself tightening up inside and feeling resentment and anger at things not working your way, but then you will kill yourself. The best thing to do is to breathe, realize that everyone you love is alive and well, and you have food, and the house is still standing around you, and all is well, and it will be okay in the future. And that's what we do here, which leads me to lesson 5. Patience is not a virtue, it's a survival skill. 20 years ago, I was not the patient person that I am today. I wanted to see results quickly. I wanted to see it done. I wanted the place finished. I wanted the first party happening. But Lalande has definitely cured me of that. I'm not sure whether it's cured me or broken me. I think the jury's still out on that, one or the other. But anyway, I am now a very patient person. And I get surprised sometimes when people in the comments are quite impatient for me saying, when is the heating going to happen? It's been so long. And I think as you're typing those comments, please imagine me sitting on a pole, cross-legged in a completely zen-like state, because that's how I'm feeling about it, which is, it will happen when it happens. And that might seem insane, and maybe other people who aren't like me would get things done much faster, but I'm getting things done slowly, but with my sanity intact, and I think that that's also quite important. Lesson 6 is don't confuse luxuries with necessities. Now, this is definitely something that I did when I first moved in, and it's something that I think a lot of people who are coming from comfortable, heated houses, it's their mindset when they also move into a historic house that needs renovation. So my first thought was, oh my goodness, we need heating, because we had no heating our first winter. It was absolutely freezing. To get out of the bath, I devised a system whereby I would completely dry and dress the upper part of my body before attempting to step out, and quickly dry and dress the lower part of my body, because you just couldn't be naked and wet standing in the room. It was so cold. And I remember I used to say to my parents all the time, how did the previous Marquis live here? Because he was living in the downstairs apartment. He was in his 80s. He had a housekeeper also in her 80s who was living in the gardener's cottage on the other side, and they would meet in the kitchen for meals. And it would have been unimaginably freezing. But now I feel completely differently about it, because now we've gone back, unfortunately, to not having heating again. We have nearly finished installing a huge heating system, which will solve this problem in future. But I haven't been worrying in the years that I haven't had it, because we have all toughened up. And I learnt a valuable lesson, which is that it is not because we were born in the late 20th century that we are weaklings. We are every bit as tough as all of the generations who've lived in these homes before us. If they could do it, we can do it. Now, sometimes it takes a little while for us to be jolted into that realization, but I thank Lalande for that, because I've learnt that I can live differently. I've learnt that I can strap a hot water bottle to myself, and actually that makes me pretty comfortable all day. And it does make me laugh at the thought of when I do have the heating, the difference in cost that there will be between my hot water bottle being strapped to my body and the heating, because apparently when we finally turn it on, if we heated the entire chateau for the entire winter, it would cost approximately 30,000 euros. So it would actually be cheaper for me to hire a villa on the beach in Thailand, say, to fly all of the Lalandes out for the entire winter, business class, and I'd still come home with change compared to turning the heating on back here. So just to put that in perspective, it's completely crazy. So obviously when we have the heating, we won't be turning the entire chateau on all of the time, but we will at least be able to have radiators working in our rooms. We do have heating in the kitchen now, and that's working really well. So that's a lovely space for us all to meet. But it was a very valuable lesson to learn that we're all comfortable, we're all happy, and we're all coping really well. And it's something that you should tell yourself before moving into a historic home. Don't worry about the discomfort, because it will get better, but on top of it getting better, you will get tougher, and that's a really nice feeling. Lesson 7 is listen to the building. And I should maybe have started with this one, because it's a really important lesson to have in mind before choosing your chateau. And it's, don't try to shoehorn your aesthetic into a chateau that is not made for it. So, for example, don't choose a beautiful 18th century jewel box of a chateau with all of its original paneling and then rip that out to make it into a beautiful minimalist open plan living area. You can find chateaus to do that in. You can find all sorts of chateaus where the interiors have been gutted, or where the interiors have suffered from dry rot and have to be ripped out. And then you can make this wonderful aesthetic of the historic shell and this beautiful minimalist open plan living space. But be sure that you're not destroying something to make your vision come true. So, for example, here we've discovered the ceiling from the 1620s that I mentioned before, and it is very beautiful. It has wonderful tulips painted on it in delicate blue vases with little faces on them. It is, however, very brown. And that's because all of the ceilings of that time tended to be painted either a very dark red or a dark brown. That was the fashion in the day, and I think it was probably to hide the soot from the fires and from the candles that they would have been using for light. Now, I didn't want a massive brown ceiling in my main sitting room. I wanted a lovely white plaster ceiling with beautiful, delicate stucco work on it. But this is what we have here, and so I am going to see the beauty in it, bring the beauty out by restoring it, and choosing everything else that goes into that room specifically to work with that ceiling and to be in harmony with it and to highlight its beauty, because that is what this chateau needs. So listen to your chateau and put its tastes above your own. Lesson 8. Prepare to become a reluctant expert in things that you never expected. So here, for example, I never wanted to learn how to make curtains. I've made over 100 curtain drops now. I can probably make curtains and palmettes in my sleep. I never wanted to learn French accountancy terms. To be honest, I didn't want to learn accountancy terms in any language, but I can now chat with my accountant and express myself, and I had no interest in learning how to cater for large groups of people. But the night before our first ever workshop here, I had 15 people coming for a music workshop, and I'd arranged somebody from the local area who was going to be doing all of the cooking. And the night before, they told me that they were moving house away and wouldn't be able to do it. I found that out in the afternoon, and I had all night to read all of my mother's cookery books so that I would be ready the next day to spend an entire week making breakfast, lunch and dinner for a group of 15 people. I remember that I was up until pretty much 5 a.m. every night preparing for the next day and having to start again at 8 a.m. to get the breakfast ready. And that week nearly killed me. But you know what? The next time we had a workshop, I didn't bother booking anybody to do the cooking because I'd learnt that I could do it myself, and I found it was a little quicker and a little easier. And the next workshop, easier still, until I started really enjoying it. So whilst you do become a reluctant expert, in the end, all of those new life skills become very enjoyable, and you become proud of what you've achieved and proud of what you can do, and it opens up new avenues for you yet again. But that does lead me to lesson 9. Knowing when not to DIY is crucial. You simply need to know your own limitations. Now, some of you out there might literally be able to turn your hand to anything you touch. There are people who can do that, in which case you probably have no limitations to your DIY. I am not one of those people. My artistic skills leave quite a lot to be desired, so I wasn't going to be the person to start restoring the intricate, delicate paintwork inside our chapel. For that, I knew that I had to find specialist artisan restorers. The ones that worked on our chapel also worked on restoring the Cathedral of Notre Dame after its terrible fire. The gilder who came to our chapel had also worked on Notre Dame, and were also looking at using a specialised historic restoration firm for the work on our ceiling. So know when to step away and get the experts in, because it is not worth destroying something irreplaceable for the sake of your ego or your wallet. However, as we'll see in lesson 10, that is not always so easy, because lesson 10 is finding the right artisans. It takes a long time to build up the right team. We are still looking for some members of our team, but we have such a great core group now. I was really lucky that my cousin Amory moved out here to live with me. He is a master carpenter. He has created the most beautiful wooden panelling in the Marquise Salon, and he will be doing all of the panelling in our new future dining room and grand salons. I cannot wait to see them. We have our plasterer Chris, who manages to keep smiling and usually singing whatever the chateau throws at him. So even when there's a crisis going on, he just emits sunshine to the rest of us, lifting all of our spirits. Then we have our electrician, Ben, a man who fixed a light switch downstairs in a bedroom in the east wing by locating the problem upstairs in the central wing. He did not give up until he found the root cause of that problem and fixed it. He's been invaluable in helping with the electricity here. And I found an architect and building team who specialise in historic restorations, and without them the chapel would still be a ruin. They have brought it back to life so magnificently, and they've also saved the Grand Salon by bringing in the new beams that we needed, and that has set us up for a whole new unexpected adventure at Lalande that I think will be the most exciting one that we've had so far, as we restore the ceiling that we found in the new Grand Salon upstairs. And I think that brings me to the most fundamental point that I've found here at Lalande, and that's the people. Because lesson 11 is chateaux were not built for two. These buildings were built not only for large families, and in fact, I bought from brothers and sisters who owned it jointly, and there were 11 of them. They already had over 30 children and over 60 grandchildren. So they were huge families, but they were also built for a lot of staff living here. Back in the 1880s, there were about 10 staff living here full time, as well as the Nadayak family. And when I moved in, there were just 4 of us. There was me and my co-owner Nick and my parents. And it was wonderful. We were all together, but it was very daunting. And then one by one, they left. Nick had to go back to England for work. My father sadly passed away 4 years after I bought. And then my mother wonderfully found love in South Africa and moved there to be with her new husband. And I'm so thankful for that because Percy is absolutely wonderful. But it meant that for quite a while, I went through what I call the Miss Havisham years when I was often alone at the chateau, surrounded by cobwebs. And in that time, there was a whole wing that I rarely set foot in. That was the east wing, the main old part of the building. And the empty, uninhabited rooms weighed on my soul. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it did. It weighed on me that there was this space that was just wasted and crumbling and no one was going to it. And I didn't realise how much the chateau needed people until I started having volunteers coming here. Suddenly, life and laughter and light seemed to flood into the chateau as the rooms were being used, and you could hear people chatting in the corridors, and everything changed. And I think that this is something that's very important for people who are thinking of moving to a chateau. If you are moving there as a nuclear family, maybe try and find one that isn't too vastly huge unless you know yourselves very well and you know that you're happy with that, because it can get overwhelming to live in a place that is not filled with life. And lesson 12 is that sharing your journey creates magic. Because here at Lalande, I'm sharing my life not just with the wonderful people that I live with, but with all of you around the world. And that's something that happened very unexpectedly, because when I moved in here back in October 2005, I don't even know if YouTube existed, but I certainly hadn't heard of it. I'd never thought about social media, and little did I know then that documenting our life here and sharing it would transform everything, not only for our lives, all of us living here, but for the entire future of the chateau. And some of the most transformative ideas that we've had here have come not from us, but from our viewers. For example, the entire idea of adopting a star in order to save the chapel came from one of our viewers in a comment that they left on the vlog. We would never have been able to restore the chapel as we have done. All of those years ago, I could have chosen to keep this chateau completely private, and many chateau owners do, which I completely understand. But choosing to open this chateau to volunteers, to guests, and to all of the viewers on YouTube has created such joy in our lives. It's the strangest thing. The more we share the beauty and joy that we have here, the more it's amplified. It's like the most incredible virtuous circle. But from the idea of this wonderful global community, I'm going to come back to the little things now, because lesson 13 is focus on little comforts. And that's because when you're embarking on a huge restoration program, if you are living in the building throughout it, as I have done, you will find that you are surrounded by a work site, by dust, by diggers. I mean, we've had diggers inside the chateau, by discomfort and by stress. And a way that I found to cope with that and to offset it is to make sure that all of the little things that surround me give me pleasure. For example, my bedding is really soft, my duvet's really fluffy, as are my towels. I have a lovely mug that makes me happy whenever I look at it. When I go to my underwear drawer in the morning, this is going to sound really crazy, but my underwear is matching. And these things don't need to be expensive at all. It just makes you feel as though you have some control over your life, because whilst everything else is falling down around you, if these little things that are the things that you interact with most in your daily life, if they are nice, you find that you can cope with the big things like an entire wall missing in your bedroom because your duvet is soft, you've got a nice hot water bottle, got a lovely cup of tea next to you. All of these things matter. If you look after the little things, the big things won't feel so bad. And in the same way, lesson 14 is small victories sustain you. You might be waiting for an enormous project to finish and just feeling like it's never ending, and you'll open a bottle of champagne when it's done, and that could be 2 years down the line. But if instead you break it up into little bite-sized chunks and celebrate each one of those achievements, you'll find so much more pleasure along the way. For example, with the kitchen, I had a lot of comments on the video saying, why are you and Philip putting plates on a shelf when the kitchen isn't finished yet and you have to just take it off the shelf again for all of the work to be done? And that's because that shelf, that's a victory. The minute one more thing arrived, we would celebrate it in our own way. It might be putting a little copper pot on it and looking at it, just standing, staring at it, sipping a glass of wine in front of it. Then, of course, you move it for the work to carry on, but all of those things are victories. And I think I've been doing that for the last 20 years at Lalande. And if you find that focusing on those little victories isn't quite enough and you're still going completely insane, then remember lesson 15, which is that living amid so much history changes your sense of time. When I'm stressing about a deadline, something not having happened that I wanted to have happen, all sorts of problems, and I'll just go and stand in a quiet part of the chateau. I look at the ancient walls and I remember that people have lived here for centuries before me. They've lived through revolution. They will have mourned and celebrated. They'll have had victories and defeats in these walls. And I'm standing here in those very same rooms, worrying about something that even in 20 years' time of my own life will probably seem completely insignificant. But put in the context of all of that history is totally insignificant. And there's something profoundly calming about that. The crisis that I am experiencing is temporary. Hopefully the chateau is not, and it should outlive me for centuries. Lesson 16 is a bit of a quirky one, and it is antiques make sense. And not in the way that you think. I don't mean, oh, antiques look beautiful in a wonderful historic home. No, I mean that they actually make very practical sense. When you are living without heating, you start to covet things like these wonderful spode hot water plates. We don't have one here, and now that the kitchen's heated, we shouldn't need it. But these would have been invaluable to me in the last few winters, because you just pour water into the little opening and your food stays warm on the plate in an unheated room. This is genius. And one of the things that proved really useful when we first moved in, which I would never have thought of needing in a normal home, was a fire screen, one where you can actually adjust where the screen is. And that's because when you're living in a room where the only source of heating is a log fire, if you're anywhere further than 1 meter from it, you are freezing cold. And if you are within a meter of it, then your body is just about okay, or at least one side of it, but your face is about to burn off. And so those fire screens make it really comfortable because they just shield the heat from your face, but allow your body to absorb all of that heat. So objects that seem completely obsolete to modern life could be your best friend when you're restoring a historic home. The next lesson is, I think, one of the most important, and it's lesson 17. Feed your soul. That might sound really airy-fairy, but it is very important, and it's one that I didn't know when I first moved in, and that I see happening time and again to people who've bought chateaus more recently than me. And it's that when you arrive in a chateau, you throw yourself into everything that needs doing. You throw yourself into the renovations, and in my case, throw yourself into making curtains and not doing anything else for over a year, because I was here to serve the chateau. I wanted to get it done. I wanted to get it finished. And I see a lot of people doing that and completely losing themselves and losing their joy in life and starting to think, I've bitten off more than I can chew. I'll never do this. It's never going to end. Is this going to be my life forever? And I think a way of fixing that problem is not losing yourself in the relationship that you have with your chateau. In any healthy relationship, you need to keep who you are so that you have something to offer the other person, in this case, the chateau. So if, for example, your soul is fed by painting, make sure that in all of your restoration schedule, you're able to paint. Or if it's going to gastronomic restaurants, make sure that you set aside some of your budget to be able to continue doing that. Because if you totally deplete yourself, you'll have nothing left to give and you will end up selling thinking that you made a huge mistake. Make sure that you are in a good place, and then your home can be in a good place. But you cannot serve your home if there's nothing left of you. It took me a couple of years to realize that at the beginning, and I think the realization hit me at around the same time as I realized that the chateau would never be finished. And then things changed. I was like, okay, then it's for life. I realized that if I spent all of my time only restoring the chateau and not doing the things that I loved, then I would no longer be living in a chateau. I would just be effectively showing up at work in a chateau. You have to live in the chateau to enjoy it. So we've made sure all along the way that we take time to have parties. We take time to have celebrations. I make sure that I still travel as I used to before, and I come back filled with inspiration, with ideas for the place. I think that's really the biggest thing I can say to you, actually, if you're looking to buy a chateau, is do not lose yourself. Feed your passions, feed all of the things that make you happy, and then you will be in a good position to look after the home that you've taken on. Because lesson 18 is the journey is the destination. Don't put off your life until the chateau is restored. You'll be restoring it all of your life. So enjoy every minute of it. Enjoy the journey. Go through all the highs and lows. Living in a chateau is a roller coaster, and the highs are so wonderful. The lows are pretty dreadful. I'm not going to hide that from you, but they are temporary. You keep on going. When I lost my father, I lost my biggest cheerleader for the chateau. My mother hated seeing all of the work. It stressed her. Nick wondered, have we done the right thing? It's just costing so much more than we thought. My father, every step of the way, said, oh, no, this is perfect. This is great. It's going to be beautiful. And he had that vision in his mind. And losing him, I lost not only my father, whom I adored, but I lost my main teammate in the restoration of the chateau. And it was very, very hard to come back for that. And I won't lie, it took me many years. But although there are times like that when it seems that you just cannot see your way back into the light, if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other and remember to keep celebrating those tiny victories, to keep seeing the joys and the little things around you. Those are the little things that help to pull you through and help you to start seeing the world in colour again. So don't give up, ride that roller coaster and enjoy the thrill, and know that when you get to the highs, you've deserved them because you went through the lows. And when the next lot of unexpected bills come in, which they will, remember lesson 19. Wealth is not just money. Over the last 20 years, I have spent what must now amount to millions on this chateau, and if I sold it tomorrow, I would get barely a tiny fraction of that back. By financial measures, this was a terrible investment. But by any other measure, I feel like one of the richest people that I know. I wake up and look out of the window and see nothing but calm, beauty, nature. I walk downstairs to hear laughter in the kitchen from all of the lovely, often hilarious people that I live with. I feel that my life has a purpose. I'm preserving history as I go forward. And I have this incredible community of people around the world that I'm communicating with every single day. So instead of freaking out when I got the quote of 140,000 to restore the ceiling of the Grand Salon, I tried to take a deep breath and think, it is a privilege to even be able to consider the ability to restore the ceiling of the Grand Salon. And that is now a goal. That's now a positive thing in my life, to aim to be able to do that in future. Okay, I will admit there might have been a tiny freak out when I first saw the quote. And when a lot of the crises happen here, I do have a tiny little freak out when I first see them. But then I have to sit back and remember that looking at something in a positive light actually changes the situation. I know that sounds crazy, but it does. The way you look at something changes everything. Suddenly you'll find you have the strength to cope with it, the strength to tackle it. And this is it. We've made it to the last lesson, and it's a biggie. Lesson 20. Happiness comes from earning your living, doing something you love, that also makes a positive difference to others. And I think that is the golden equation of life happiness. If you can find a job that you love doing, that doesn't feel like work, however many hours you're putting into it because it's a passion, that also remunerates you so that you're able to live well from it, and that brings happiness to others, then you found your right path in life. And so if your passion is to restore a chateau, and if you think that you can make it work financially, and that could, in this day and age, be from social media, it could be from weddings, it could be from a guest house, it could be from retreats. There's all sorts of different ways that you can think of trying to make money to restore a chateau. If you think that you would enjoy that work and know that it will bring happiness to others if you do it well, then I think you're on the right path. If it is not your passion, it will just become a burden. So find your passion and pursue that and try to bring light and joy into the lives of the people around you. And that's where you'll find your happiness. At this point in time, I feel very happy because all of those things are in place in my life. And I feel as generations of chateau owners before me have felt when things were going well. But I know that the only certainty we can count on in life is change. So I don't know if YouTube will still be providing an income for us here at Lalande in 10 years' time. Who knows what the future holds? I don't have a crystal ball, but I do know that armed with these lessons, if things change, hopefully we at Lalande will pause, reflect, pivot, and look for the silver lining in the new situation. I think that's something that we should all be doing in our lives. So that was it. 20 years, 20 lessons. And I think I could have come up with loads more lessons because every single day at Lalande teaches me something. Some lessons more welcome than others. And in fact, if someone had told me on day one all of the challenges and all of the costs that would lie ahead, and they'd asked me if I still wanted to go ahead, I'd probably have said no. So thank goodness I didn't know what changes were coming, because buying Lalande turns out to have been the best decision I ever made in my life. Sometimes you just have to take the leap. So here's to the next 20 years. I'm sorry that I'm cheersing with tea, but it is all that I have in the study at the moment. Here's to 20 more years of disasters and triumphs, and I hope a lot of laughter along the way. And thank you all for being on this journey with us, because whether you started watching from the very beginning or whether you've just started watching recently, you're part of Lalande's story too now, and I am eternally grateful for that. If you enjoyed hearing these lessons, then please leave a like on the video because it really does help the channel. And also in the comments below, I would love to hear which lessons resonated the most with you, or which lessons you think we should take on board to help us for the next few decades at the Chateau. And if you'd like to join us on the rollercoaster ride of life at the Chateau, then please do subscribe to the channel. I will next see you in the Chateau Diaries, sharing our normal daily life at Lalande. And until then, lots and lots of love from Lalande.